and gentlemen, good afternoon. Can I invite everyone to take their seats, please? And may I thank this hotel for its very good air conditioning. We walked in earlier. It's probably the best place to be in Brussels right now, in that sense. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeff Lead. This is of no importance, except I will be acting as moderator for this afternoon's conference on Re-energizing Europe -now. And the now, with the exclamation mark, is all important in this issue, of course. This conference marks the completion of the third and last New Pact for Europe initiative, the last programme, and the third report, which you'll be hearing about in a minute. And this is, of course, the culmination of 5 years of work to give shape to Europe's future, steered by the King Baudouin Foundation, Bertelsmann Stiftung, Open Society Initiative, and the European Policy Centre. The report will be, as you know, looking at your programme, presented shortly. There will be a keynote speech, plenty of time for your questions, and most exciting, you will be asked questions in a very short while, so please stay awake, because in a short minute, we will go interactive, which I think is the modern jargon. But before any of that happens, it's my pleasure to give the floor for a proper welcome to this conference to Karl-Heinz Lamberts, President of the Committee of the Region, and in this context, very importantly, Vice President of the Board of Governors of the King Baudouin Foundation. Mr. Lamberts.
Dear President Juncker, dear President Van Rompuy, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome you on behalf of the Foundation and its partners, the Bertelsmann Stiftung, the Open Society Foundation, and the European Policy Centre. The New Pact for Europe project started 5 years ago, a long time in European life. As a first successful phase, included more than 80 debates in 17 EU countries and the publication of 2 major reports elaborating and evaluating strategic options on the future of the European Union. In 2016, the NPE project entered a new phase. The ultimate aim of this phase, which ends in June, was to identify and elaborate key elements of a wider package deal, reflecting the different interests and concerns within the EU with strong and balanced tools to meet the challenges it faces. The project has culminated in the third NPE report, Re-energizing Europe, which will be discussed today. This report is very important and timely because we cannot and must not wait for the next European elections to build our common future. As President Rompuy wrote, populists lost battles in 2017, but they have not yet lost the war. Let me share a few personal thoughts with you and on how to rebuild trust between the EU and its citizens. Most of them are reflected in this report. Firstly, we have to convince our citizens of the European added value in the places where they live, their villages, cities, and regions. They must be convinced in their soul, in their heart, and even in their stomach that the EU can make the difference to support them. Europeans need Europe. But let's not forget that Europe needs also Europeans. This is why their engagement in the future of the EU is crucial. This is why also all the citizens' dialogues should not end with the EU elections, but go beyond that. Otherwise, the frustration will be even higher than today. then the EU must be rebuilt from the bottom up. The shaping of EU policies cannot be a top-down process only. Our cities and regions must be able to have their say on the future of the European Union. Local and regional councils must be considered as crucial elements of European democracy. It is important to remind that all levels of governance must work together, not one against each other. The subsidiarity principle should not be used against the EU. Subsidiarity should be a way to empower the EU action at local level. Subsidiarity should therefore allow us to support regional development. We should never forget the EU's core objectives and values. Among others, socio-economic and territorial cohesion, economic and social progress and solidarity should never be forgotten. As Jacques Delors said, it is difficult to fall in love with the single market. The EU must deliver credible results on this is why, for example, we need to operationalize the European Pillar of Social Rights as suggested by the report. My last thought would be to remind you that there can be no sincere ambition without any serious budget to support it. We all know how small the European budget already is. We have to preserve it at least. And as the report states, this budget should allocate more resources to expanding the possibilities to experience Europe. This means supporting, among others, the cohesion policy because it brings jobs, supports infrastructure, and helps EU citizens to face new challenges where they live. It should be preserved for all regions, and beyond the European budget, cities, regions, and member states must have enough maneuvering room to invest themselves. That is the spirit of the Rome Declaration. This is why the proposal of introducing a golden rule allowing some public investment to be excluded from countries' deficit calculation is so important. All this is easy to say, but it's more difficult to bring concrete proposals into the debate. The report suggests changes in the way that the EU and its policies are defined to avoid future fundamental crises and to better serve the interests of the EU citizens. It has not been a top-down process. National reflections groups were created and met in 10 European countries, followed by transnational exchanges among these groups. These national reflection groups produced country reports. The third NPE report discussed today reflects all this work, and the subsequent discussions of a European reflecting group consisting all national rapporteurs. The project has also benefited from the overall guidance of an advisory group of high-ranking policymakers, academics, NGO representatives, and other stakeholders from all over Europe, chaired by Herman Van Rompuy. The report speaks on a window of opportunity for EU reform during 2018 and proposes a package deal connecting key policy challenges. The aim of the event today is to discuss how this approach can benefit to current debate. On behalf of the King Baudouin Foundation and its partners, I would like to thank the author of the report, Yannis Emanuelidis, from the European Policy Center, and his team for their excellent work. We would like also to thank the foundation who co-founded the initiative, as well as the national implementations partner. Finally, we would like to thank the members of the European Reflection Group and the Advisory Group, especially Chair Herman Van Rompuy, for their guidance and support over the last years. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Lamberts. And we'll hear more from Mr. Lamberts later on because he will now be joining the panel at the last minute, and thank you for doing so, sir. And that's because Didier Reynders unfortunately cannot be here. His staff has let it be known that there is a parliamentary gathering this afternoon here to discuss the Liège shootings. So unfortunately, Mr. Reynders can't be here, but Mr. Lamberts will stay with us and be party to the questions. Now, talking of questions, let's turn the tables. Before we go on to our next speaker and the unveiling of the new report, this is where I'm out of my comfort zone, ladies and gentlemen, really, because I'm not a high-tech individual, and I know there are some others in this room who are the same. But you will now use your smartphones, or you're invited to use your smartphones, to go onto sligo.com, and that's, I said Sligo, that's an Irish place, slido.com, hashtag A270, and when you get there, you'll be able to answer, if you wish, questions that are about to come up, because we want your views on what's going on here today. So if you, first of all, will do that, those of you who wish to, I imagine this offer is open to everyone, including our distinguished guests. If they wish to go online and get involved, I'm sure they're welcome to. No, says one of our guests down in front here. Well said, sir. But I hope that most of you will nevertheless do so. Okay, so I think that's the page you'll see on your smartphone screen at the moment, I think. Here we go. How would you describe in one word the current state of the European Union? And please try to make them polite, but in a way, if you don't, that's okay too, because it's one of these clever word things where, you know, the bigger the word, the more people have used it. God, that's also rather a temptation, isn't it? But you know what I mean. So, in one word. Now, may I just say, you don't have to do that right now. This exciting offer will be open right through Yanis's presentation in a minute. And technically, you could actually make a judgment now on this question and the second one, and then be so impressed by Yanis's presentation of what the new Pact for Europe is all about that you might change your mind, in a positive way, we hope. So you can answer the questions now. You can change them as we go along. And after Yanis has completed his presentation, we will then shut that down. So your decision, your replies become definitive about 2 minutes after Yanis has finished his presentation. So I don't know if we're going to see the next question come up, because we're certainly not seeing any answers now. There we are. These are the questions. Will the EU 27 adopt a win-win package deal before the end of the year? Well, there's a good question. On what? Well, maybe on what should be the next question afterwards. But anything that we could call a win-win package, I think, is the answer. And I like these answers. Yes, of course. I mean, you can hear them. Yes, of course. When it's crunch time, the EU always manages to deliver. That's the ultimate positive message. You can pick that one. Not really. Don't expect a real breakthrough. This person's being very negative. Not really. Don't expect a real breakthrough. The EU will continue to muddle through. Okay? Oh, and then this, oh dear. No, forget it. Too many red lines and differences among the 27. And impossible to say, given the uncertainties, but I remain hopeful. So those are the choices you face. So if you can now deal with those questions and consider changing your mind as we go along for the next 15, 20 minutes. So how positive the final result is of our little survey may depend entirely on our next speaker. So you know him very well, but I'd like to invite Yanis Emanuelidis, Director of Studies at the EPC, and obviously a solid rock in the preparation, development, and finalization of this third report. Please, Yanis, officially now come and tell us what it's all about, and persuade those reluctant voters to change their minds if they're being too negative. Yanis.
Thank you, Geoff, for setting the bar even higher now. I will try my best to explain what the package deal is about, and maybe I will also change the minds of some of you while doing so. But first of all, let me thank you all and welcome you all, and thank you for coming here. I am very happy to see all of you here because I think that this is a very critical moment in which we're discussing the current state but also the future of the European Union. I think that a lot is at stake, so I'm very happy that so much of you have come here to do this with us. The task I have and Geoff already alluded to that, is to kick off today's debate by presenting the third New Pact for Europe report. And I will do so within 15 minutes. So I don't have too much time giving the density of what we've worked on over the past year, but I will do my best. But let me first of all thank Karl-Heinz Lamberts for his very warm words of introduction, but also thank all those who have been involved in this process. And when I look around in this room, there are a lot of people who had been involved in this process over the past 5 years, and it would not have been possible without all of you in Brussels, but also especially in the member states. So thank you for all of that. And what I will be reporting on reflects more than 120 national and transnational debates we had throughout Europe. It reflects the country reports, as Mr. Lamberts, President Lamberts already alluded to, and the discussions we had in different fora. So this is truly a collective effort. And the New Pact for Europe report starts with an analysis of the State of the Union and then comes up with concrete proposals of what we think needs to be done on the basis of where we are today. And we've discussed it in the member states since the end of last year, and we continue to try to foster that debate. What I will try now to do in the remaining 13 minutes is to pose and to answer two rather simple questions. One is, where do we stand? And the second one is, where could, or what could and what should be done in the upcoming period? And I will try to also reflect on the debates which we've already had in so many member states. So where do we stand? The State of the Union obviously is a moving target. It changes all the time. When we published the report in November of last year, we were in a bit of a different situation than we are today. So it is truly a moving target. And we are now at this critical political juncture where we do not know how things will work out and develop. And that was also an appreciation we had in the debates which we've had up till now in the member states. In the report, we say that there are four main characteristics. So although it is a moving target, there are four main structural characteristics which do not only show you where the EU stands, but they also shape future prospects for the European Union. The first characteristic, and again, be reminded that we published the report in November of last year, when we really saw that there is a new sense of optimism. 2000 year was a year in which we felt more optimism in many countries throughout the European Union. There was this feeling that there could be a wind of opportunity to push reforms forward. And if you remember back in 2016, after the Brexit vote, we were in a very different situation. When the EU was still, as we were saying in this town, in polycrisis mode, when there was a fear of a domino effect of the Brexit decision. In my words, I would even say that there was a collective depression which you could feel in Brussels, but which you could also feel in many places around Europe. And the EU 27 were trying their best to display unity, but they were also struggling in their effort to display unity. Plus, there was also a negative expectation. Again, if you think back at the end of 2016, there was a fear that 2017 might be, as we say in the report, the real political annus horribilis. With the elections in Austria, the Netherlands, France, and Germany ahead, there was a fear that things might go wrong. But in the course of 2017, there was an increasing sense of optimism with respect to the future of the European Union for different reasons. One was that Brexit did not disunite, but unite the EU 27. Then there was the election of President Trump, which showed what can happen even in Western democracies, but it also created uncertainties with respect to international relations and transatlantic relations. But at the same time, we had a period of economic improvement compared to the years before. And last but not least, the elections in Austria, in the Netherlands, in France, did not lead to Hofer, Wilders, or Le Pen assuming power, even led to the most pro-European president we've had since Giscard d'Estaing in France with President Macron. So there was a hope at the end of last year that there is this sense of optimism, a window of opportunity for a new momentum, and that we clearly expressed in the report. But today, one must say that there are more doubts. And that became also obvious in the debates which we've had in the member states. Many questions came up. Will the member states be ready to exploit the window of opportunity? Will France and Germany be able to agree on a common initiative, and when? Will this initiative be strong enough to be a compromise basis in such a divided European Union, with many differences between member states? And finally, now we're asking ourselves how the events in Italy might affect this window of opportunity. And some even question whether there really ever was a window of opportunity. I believe that there has been and that there still is one. But it will require a lot of political courage to use it in order to progress forward. And the latest clouds, I think, are indicating even a more urgent need to progress and to exploit that window of opportunity. But despite the many uncertainties, there are certain things which are certain, and they're mentioned also in the report, which leads me to the second characteristic, which is that the pulley crisis remains structurally unresolved. We need further reforms. Yes, progress has been achieved, the worst has been avoided, but none of the individual crises, if you look at them, have been sustainably overcome. Crises could reignite. The defenses of Europe are stronger, but still some structural deficits have not been overcome. If you look into the so-called euro area crisis, a lot has happened, but a lot of the ideas included in the 4 presidents or 5 presidents report have not been implemented. If you look at the migration crisis, yes, the numbers have gone substantially down, but structurally we still need to implement reform. So in sum, the EU is not yet storm-proof, and next storms will come. We do not know where they will come from, how they will be, but they will come, and the EU will be confronted with that. And it will be confronted with that leads me to characteristic 3, while the EU is still facing the collateral damages, or the collateral damage which was caused by the last 10 years, which still need repair, which cast shadow on the EU and on the ability of member states to agree and to push things forward. There is distrust and fragmentation between member states, between national capitals and so-called Brussels, and that fragmentation has grown. The EU in many countries is no longer being perceived as a win-win situation, as something from which all member states profit, some more, some less. Plus, there's also an increased divergence. We see that in real terms, but also in thinking terms. If you look in the economy over the last 10 years, the economies have diverged among member states, but also in thinking terms, because if you talk to people in member states with respect to where we are, what the analysis is of the current situation, what to do, they differ a lot. Sometimes when I was traveling around discussing the new Pact in member states, I got the feeling that people were living on different planets, with understanding the same situation in very different ways. And last but not least, one of the collateral damage is that we have an widespread frustration with the EU as it stands. Not with European integration, because a lot of people are still very positive about European integration, but there is criticism with the EU as it stands, and that has also reached the elites, which is different to where we were 10 or 15 years ago. And the last characteristic, I already said that 2017 was not the annus horribilis which some had feared, but the authoritarian populist threat still persists. And there's no reason to believe, as some did already last year, that we are in a post-populist moment, as some suggested. There is no indication that the populist phenomenon has peaked. And the populist phenomenon is a phenomenon which is deep-rooted. It is showing deep challenges which we're all facing, which need to be addressed at all levels, at European, at national, at regional, at local. So there's a key danger which we are facing, which we are clearly alluded in the report, which is the risk of a more regressive, nationalistic, closed, illiberal, authoritarian Europe. That's a key element of the report, but it's also something which became very clear while we were discussing the report in the member state. So if I sum up, it's a very mixed picture. There is a new sense of optimism, discussion about a window of opportunity, but there are also increasing doubts while we're confronted with the collateral damages of the past 10 years and the danger of an illiberal authoritarian Europe. Which leads me to the second question, which is what could and what should be done, and what we proposed in the report. What we clearly state is that the current window of opportunity will not be open for very long, and it is not very big. In terms of time, in the report we say that probably we have until the end of 2018 to use this current window of opportunity. But we're already witnessing that the window of opportunity is closing or starting to close, and the upcoming months will thus be decisive. In terms of size, this window of opportunity is not a huge door opening itself to a huge terrace. It's more like a skylight in terms of what can be achieved. There's a strong dogma of realism in the member states. So it's not about treaty change. It's not about an institutional overhaul. It is not about a giant leap. On the contrary, there are severe differences and red lines between member states. And the question is, how can one overcome these blockades? How can one make progress while thinking of the following questions? Who gets what in exchange for what? If we don't think this way, the current window of opportunity might be lost. The EU does not need to be reinvented. It has a solid basis on which it is resting. It needs to, as the title of today's conference says, needs to be re-energized, and it needs to be made future-proof. But the question is, what kind of bargaining are we talking about? The answer we provide in the New Pact for Europe report is, and President Lambert has already alluded to that, the need for a win-win package deal, which reflects the interests and the concerns of different positions between and within member states. Something else which became very clear in all our debates in the member states, that there are not only huge differences between member states, but also within member states, which you need to help to overcome, which is no easy task. But you need concrete compromises in order to achieve progress in the years to come. In many ways, you need an ambitious, but at the same time pragmatic package deal, which avoids symbolism and avoids cosmetic reforms. You need something which is worthwhile. The concept of this EU 27 package deal or bargain needs to cover three dimensions, and that became very clear also in the debates we had in the member states, which reflect the diverging concerns in the EU 27. Migration is one area, one dimension, the economy, including the social aspects, and last but not least, security and defense. All these issues are very relevant issues for citizens. They're not abstract issues. And the New Pact for Europe report has tried its best to show that a bargain is possible and what a potential package deal could look like. I won't be able to describe that package deal in detail. That would not be possible within the time I still have at my disposal, but I will just try to give you a flavor of what we're talking about, and you can see more in the report. With respect to the dimension of migration, what is required is a bargain between the security and the solidarity camp, and we need both to be reflected. A bargain which reflects those who believe that Europe must counter the sense of insecurity, must close borders, must protect itself from overwhelming numbers of people reaching Europe. That's the security camp. But then there's also the other camp which insists that there's a need to boost solidarity between member states, but also solidarity with those who are knocking on our doors and the countries of transit and origin. And we need to find a compromise reflecting both of these camps. And if you look at the current state of affairs, this is a very difficult issue. There has been some progress, and I think a compromise is possible, but I think it will also only be possible if it's part of that bigger deal. The second dimension, the economy and the social dimension. This is probably the, excuse my word, toughest cookie, especially when you look at economic and monetary union reform. There's a need to reconcile what we call the responsibility and competitiveness camp with the solidarity and caring camp. The one camp which is saying member states need to do their homework, that there's a need to strengthen competitiveness, that there's a need to reinforce the links between national reforms and EU funding, that even there's a need for a credible no bailout rule. And then there's the others who say we need to complete banking union, we need some kind of a crisis shock absorption mechanism for asymmetric shocks, and we need more solidarity, especially also in the social field. Plus, there's also a need to make sure that non-EU countries don't feel disadvantaged by EMU reforms, that they're not feeling that they're being pushed into the periphery. That was something which has become very clear in all our discussion, that those who are outside the EU fear that that might happen. If you look at the state of affairs, we see that the Commission has presented numerous proposals, including today, which try to get together these two different camps, which is not easy. But what is indispensable is that there is a Franco-German initiative which is inclusive enough, reflecting also the interest of others. We know they're working on it. I'm sure it will come, but the question is, what will be its level of ambition? And even if there is such an initiative, how strong the opposition will be from others, because there is a strong veto coalition which already is out there preparing itself for proposals. So that was an attempt to sketch what this potential package deal might look like. It's very complex, and it would also will require more differentiation between member states. It will require more different multiple speeds between member states. However, that will lead to a complex map of differentiated integration, of differentiated Europe, but this should be guided by functional and pragmatic needs, and it should not lead to what some people are calling a closed Europe, which is closing itself away from other member states. That is something which in the report we say needs to be avoided. We don't need a Europe of different membership classes. Again, I know this is a complex package deal. We try to show that it is possible. We try to inspire and promote the debates at national level, but also transnational, on the basis of concrete proposals and not on the basis of an abstract debate about more or less Europe, which we don't think is the right thing to do at the present point. So to sum up, we need that wind package deal. We think it is possible. We don't know whether we will get there. We don't know whether there will be enough political will and courage in the EU 27 to push that package deal forward. The next key moment will be the June European Council. All the dimension I mentioned with respect to the package deal will be on the agenda, but I feel that there will be also additional moments in 2018 to discuss that. But the outcome of that is uncertain. But if we do not exploit the window, the current window of opportunity, I think there are a number of things which are certain. One is that if we don't exploit it, bad weather condition will come again. Storms will come. And the question is whether our defenses will be strong enough to fight back. If we do not exploit the window of opportunity, that will further increase the distrust and fragmentation between member states, among member states, with negative long-term effects which go well beyond the window of opportunity we're now discussing. And finally, if we do not exploit that window of opportunity, those who we call authoritarian, illiberal populists will cheer. They will be the ones who will be happy. And maybe at the next European Parliament elections, we will have to pay a heavy price for that if we do not fulfill and live up to the expectations which have been raised. So I thank you for your attention. This was an attempt to sketch the report, but also to share with you some feelings, some assessments with respect to debates we've had up till now. And I'm now looking forward to the results of the polling and to the speech of President Juncker. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Yanis. Yanis will be on the panel as well, so you can put questions to him. I'm just thinking we should have seen the results first and then seen if Yanis made any difference with his remarks, but we didn't. So let's see if we can decide what the mood is. Oh, good Lord, the unstable. That's a very British word, I think, really. Although stable is more the word I think we get in from London. Unstable, hopeful, challenging, shaky. The small ones, oh yeah, promising is very small. Not bad. That's quite good. Well, so, unstable is undeniable. Fragmented, divided. We're at a crossroads. Well, there we are. That's generally... Now, Yanis, I wonder if what those bigger words would have been if you had not spoken so eloquently and positively in the first place. Okay, so that's where the audience is. I don't know if our next speaker wants to address this or ignore it entirely. It's entirely up to him. We're just very grateful that he's here. So please, rousing welcome for the keynote speech today to the President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker.
Beste Hermann, lieber Karl-Heinz, dear Yanis, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I'm delighted to be here today. One is always saying that. It's never true. But this time it's true because I'm particularly happy to take the floor in the presence of my good friend and model Herman Van Rompuy, who has led, together with the spiritus rector of all this, this important reflection with your esteemed group of think tanks on the new Pact of Europe. I would like to put my speech away after having listened to Yanis, but because others in the room and outside the room are listening, I have to stick to the wording. I can't say which I have prepared, but which was prepared for me. I like those who speak after having thought. That's what you are doing as a rule. Not really reflected in this game I don't like because it's meaningless to have these questions being put to an already convinced public. You have to speak to those who are not convinced. What you are doing, but it's not reflecting in the answers you are giving to this game. I don't like these things. No, it's artificial, it's nothing, in fact. But okay, it's your choice. But it's my choice to say that this is ridiculous. There are some who think for pure intellectual pleasure, and there are others who think in the pursuit of concrete solutions to the world challenges. I place your group in the second category, which is why this is an important document, and I like it. I like this document. It's like a poem. It speaks for itself. So read the poem, love the poem, like the poem, repeat the poem, because it's dealing with the essential matters. When I was delivering my speech on the State of the Union in September 2017, Yanis, I was saying that we have a window of opportunity, and this window of opportunity would be closed in 8 months. Now, as you are a friendly guy, you're saying, okay, it will take until the end of the year 2018. I do think it's not widening. The curtains are more and more closing. Your new pact is a valuable contribution to the debate on the future of Europe and complements the many responses we have received since we presented 1 year ago in March 2017 our white paper on the future of Europe, doing something different from what was the tradition. The Commission was not dictating, prescribing, asking, but presenting 5 options, and they were largely discussed all over the place because we had 730 citizens dialogue since the start of the mandate of the Commission, and we are waiting for 2 public consultations which will take place in the next coming weeks. Europeans in 1 year from now will vote on our record, and more important than that, on our plans for the future. Elections are never about what has been done, but are always about what should be done. And so we have to explain, as you did, to our fellow Europeans where we stand today. Years ago, we were facing a deep economic crisis. When I started my mandate here in Brussels, I would never have thought, although I have some imagination, that this Commission would have as many challenges to face than we had. It was starting with Greece, Brexit. It was pursued by a general economic crisis. Then came the Brexit, then came Trump, and he will come during my speech because he will announce what the American decisions on trade will be. Not yet. I have my commentary prepared, but I have to just to prove you how serious my job is. Huh? Yeah, expect it. Where was I? Yeah, whenever I'm thinking on Trump, I'm lost. But now, our economic progress is speaking for itself. And nobody is taking this into account, really. The unemployment rate is the lowest rate we had in the last 10 years. Lowest. We have more people in work than we had ever before. Our employment rate is huge. 236 million of Europeans are in work. Our employment rate for the first time in history is higher than that of the US. We have created, since the beginning of my mandate, 9 to 10 million of jobs. That's not the merit of the Commission, of course, although some commissioners do think that it was us. But if we had lost 10 million of jobs, it would be the responsibility of the Commission. As we have created 10 million of jobs, nobody is referring, rightly so, to the Commission. The overall financial situation is positive. Deficits across Europe have gone down. We had an average level of public deficits of 6.1% in 2009. We are now reaching in 2018 0.7%. I don't know if you remember all the criticism which was addressed to the Commission when it came to the implementation of the Growth and Stability Pact. We have introduced some major elements of flexibility. Investment clause, partial reform clause. This was highly criticized in the Netherlands, in Germany, in Austria. And now, at the autopsy, what is the result? Despite a weakening of this austerity, this unilateral, stupid austerity approach, things have been improved. And the investment plan for Europe, called Juncker Plan when it was starting, because those who wanted to pre-identify the one who would be responsible for the failure called it Juncker Plan. Now it's called European Fund for Strategic Investments, but exactly the same, has already generated 290 billion euros of investment, which helps 600,000 small businesses and which will have created before 2020 700,000 new jobs. We have also built on a stronger security union, dealing with both defense and the fight against terrorism. Defense is an important matter. The Commission was never, and this is not in charge of defense policy because this is a domaine reservé for member states, but we have to have a look at the reality. We have 734 kind of weapons in Europe. In the US, 30. We have 17 types of tanks in Europe. In the US, 1. We are spending half of the American budget on defense, but our efficiency is amounting to 15–20%. So something has to be done in that domain, and we were making our proposals, which were welcomed by member states. We are building a digital single market, which has the potential to add almost 450 billion euros to the European economy each year. We are giving the citizens their digital freedom. They can travel freely and cheaply with their smartphones, their computers, their online subscriptions, and they can do this in full control of their personal data and privacy. But things are moving too slowly. Out of the 24, 25 or 26 or 27 proposals of the Commission, only 12 have been adopted by the Parliament and by the Council of Ministers. So everyone is inviting the Commission to do something to achieve progress as far as the digital is concerned. Everything is on the table. Why are they not saying that they are unable to deliver? Both Parliament and the Council. Mainly the Council, because the Parliament in all these important matters is swimming in the same direction than the European Commission is. So time has come to become more serious, because the window of opportunity is slowly closing, and so we have to deepen the economic and monetary union. It has to be done in June for some parts. It has to be done in the next coming months for other parts. I do want the Europeans to put themselves on agreement when it comes to a common deposit guarantee in Europe. This cannot be done from tonight to tomorrow morning. Some preconditions have to be fulfilled, but I want the European Council to share this commitment that we need, as all the monetary unions worldwide do have it, to share this common instrument of solidarity. The same being true in the field of the asylum system. We have to change because it doesn't work properly, it doesn't work like it should work, and there too the Commission has made all the relevant proposals. So we have, yes, to re-energize Europe in the way that your report is suggesting, and that's exactly what the Commission, since the start of our mandate, has been focused on. We are delivering on all the 10 priorities I had set out at the start of my mandate when addressing the European Parliament in order to get their votes. Not everyone was agreeing with the 10 priorities, but the overwhelming majority of the European Parliament was. The Council, European Council, under the leadership that during that period of Herman, was taking on its own shoulders the 10 priorities I have presented and the consequences entailed by these 10 priorities, and we have delivered more than 95% of the proposals we were supposed to deliver. But these proposals have to become law and have to be put into practice. I give you the example once again of the digital single market. 29 proposals, only 12 adopted. More ambition is needed, and more ambition is needed when it comes to this long-term project of the MFF, multi-financial framework. There too we have made our proposals, and this budget, as the budgets in our national member states, is not an accounting exercise. It's not a debate on percentages, decimals, virgule. It's about the future of Europe. And this is the occasion to renew our commitment to Europe and to reset our level of shared ambition. It's about the budget for the European Union of 27, because our British friends, sadly so, have decided to leave the European Union, which was something I couldn't imagine when I was starting as a president of the Commission. I couldn't imagine that. If Britain is leaving, and Britain will leave, that's exactly the same if 19 other member states would leave, to give you a sense for the proportion of what is happening by the end of March 2019. So I would like us to adopt changes with nuances, the proposal of the Commission before the European elections of next year. Why? It's not very realistic, I know, because member states don't like to take huge decisions a few days before European or national elections. But the point is that if we are proceeding like we did in the past, taking the decision at the very last moment, we are losing time. In practical terms, that means that the actors on the ground wouldn't know at the starting of the new financial period where to swim and where to move. Nobody would know, because the programs would not be fit for that very moment. We would lose 1 million young people not being able to join the Erasmus program. We are doubling by the way, as far as the financial amount dedicated to this is concerned. We would lose per month 7,000 research posts all over Europe. So it's urgent. And that's the reason why we were putting forward our proposal as early as we did, in order to give the Parliament and the Council 1 year of room maneuver of 12 months to decide on this. It's about ambition and realism. That's why we are giving the priority to the new priorities of the European Union when it comes to the budgetary framework. Everyone agrees on the priorities. More for research, more for innovation, more for digital, more for defense, more for aid development, more for this and that. But if this is the case, then you have to insert this in your budgetary framework. And if these are the priorities, and I do think that these are the right future-oriented priorities, then you have to try to find some economies in the so-called old policies of the European Union. I'm a fan of the common agricultural policy, very often underestimated by the general public. Till 64, last century, Europe was not able to provide for its own alimentation. We had to import goods. If in this new complicated world you are depending on others to make sure that you have what you have to have, then from a strategic point of view you are weakening your position. So we have to make sure that the common agricultural policy will also play a big role in the future, but there we have to reduce the direct payments. We are not as cruel as people do think. We are not saying you have to reduce direct payments, but we are saying you can switch between Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 of the common agricultural policy. Those who want to give the absolute priority to direct payments, they can do it. And those who want to make some economies in the field of rural development, they can do it. So there is more flexibility. It's up to national governments, to regional authorities to make their choice. And we have to put an end to this nasty debate, who is beneficiary, who is donor. There are no donors in the European Union. And in fact, all of us, we are beneficiaries. What is done under the headline of the regional policy in Slovakia will produce positive results in the south of Italy and vice versa if it is done in an intelligent way. We have to keep alive the sense of solidarity in the European Union. There I'm joining what Yannis said in one of his subdivisions of his easily understandable but complicated speech. We have to make sure that this sense for solidarity is not disappearing. I didn't like the debate we had around Greece and Brexit, where the dignity of the Greek people was not respected at the amount it should have been. I didn't like this lack of solidarity when it came to the migration crisis, where those who are living in the north of Europe are not taking into account the needs, the constraints of those who are border countries. We want, by the way, in this new budget, to increase the means dedicated to the external border control. Because now we have 1,253 soldiers, officers, custom officers on the ground. We want to increase this number to 10,000 in the next coming years. This is costing money. Everyone is saying you have to better protect your external borders. Nobody is speaking about the cost. We are doing it, and then we have to fix our priorities in the right orders. We have to conclude other trade agreements. I know, mainly in Belgium and the southern part of Belgium, trade agreements are not very popular. But you have to know that 1 billion export more to the outside world means the immediate creation of 14,000 jobs in the country which is exporting. So we have concluded our negotiations with Singapore, with Japan, and Mexico. We are on our way to conclude our negotiations with the Mercosur countries, difficult countries. They are saying that we are difficult, I'm saying they are difficult. And we are starting negotiations with Australia and New Zealand. These agreements are important. At the moment where our US friends are turning their back to everything which smells like a piece of multilateralism, we have to be there. And all those I'm receiving in my office, in my cantor, they are asking, where are you? Are you there? We want to improve our trade relations with the European Union, and we have to do this. I'm told that the US were announcing that they will not put an end to the exemptions which have been offered to Europe and others. This is a bad day for the world trade. The European Union cannot react to that without any kind of reaction. So we'll immediately introduce a settlement dispute on the WTO level, and we'll announce in the next coming hours counterbalancing measures. What they can do, we are able to do exactly the same. It's totally unacceptable that a country is imposing unilateral measures when it comes to world trade. To finish on a positive note, I'm repeating myself by saying that your report is like a poem. It speaks for itself, and I like it. Thank you.
Mr. President, thank you very much, and thank you for adding some breaking news excitement to our day. I assume we won't particularly concentrate on that issue right now so much as the report. And can I just ask this is probably a silly question, and it's a naive one, but I just wondered if you're in favor of this report, you think it's on the right track. Is there any way in which that report lands on the desks of fellow leaders at the summit?
It landed on my desk on the 8th of March this year, because Herman and Yannis were bringing this document to the Commission. I was reading this document, and as I was saying, I like it. It's reflecting, in fact, the substance of what has to be done. Sometimes when attending the European Council, I don't have the impression that they were reading everything.
Okay. Right, now, I don't know how long you're going to stay, sir, but I'll move on. If people have got questions from the audience at the moment. There's a gentleman over there. And there should be a microphone. Yes? Questioner and microphone are about to meet.
Jan Wulka, my name, from a StartNet project on transition to work for young people. And Mr. Juncker, you said that the European Union has to deliver. And I was wondering how you think the European Union can even better deliver for young people, for example, in the south of Italy, where still many of them are out of jobs, and reconnect to the younger citizens in order to re-energize Europe. also in view of the European elections and the threat of populism?
I'm in deep love with Italy, Bella Italia, but I'm no longer accepting that everything which is going wrong in south of Italy, Mezzogiorno, is explained by the fact that the European Union or the European Commission would not do enough. Italians have to take care of the poor regions of Italy. That means more work, less corruption, seriousness. We will help them, as we always did. But don't play this game consisting in loading with responsibility the European Union. A country is a country, a nation is a nation. Nations first, Europe second.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, lady here, please, and then gentleman through the gap.
Thank you very much for your talk. My name is Raquel Vaz Pinto. I come from Portugal. I was the Portuguese rapporteur to this
Bom dia.
report. Obrigada. My question would be about, you spoke a bit about the strategic element to this report, and taking the opportunity since you are here, how do you see the relationship between the EU and China from a strategic point of view? You also mentioned your State of the Union speech, and one of the issues was investment screening. So I was thinking, because when we look at this report, one of the things that we had to deal with, this is of course focused on a lot of internal issues, but there is also a strategic environment, and that is of course important to the evolution of EU. Thank you.
We are in permanent consultations with the Republic of China, with the President, with the Prime Minister, taking under exam our trade relations. We have a major problem with China, that's the steel overcapacity. The Chinese overcapacity in the steel sector is exactly the double of the entire steel production in the European Union, and we have to take care of our interests. That's the reason why we are trying to convince our Chinese partners to react to this situation we are watching in the steel sector. I have to say that the progress till now is limited, although they undertook some efforts, but it's not sufficient. I do think that we have a clear-cut interest in having the best relations possible with China, mainly as far as the trade issue is concerned, but not only, because we have divergences of views when it comes to social models, human rights, and these things. And I do think that we have to reconnect with Russia. I'm not very happy about the state of our relations with Russia. We will never accept what Russia did when it came to Crimea or eastern Ukraine, but nevertheless, we have to have in mind that the entire territory of the European Union is about 5.5 million square kilometers. Russia, 17.5. Questions? So we have to come back to, I wouldn't say a normal relation with Russia, but there are so many areas, so many domains where we can cooperate in a better way with Russia, research, innovation, others. Not forgetting what our differences and divergences are. But this Russia bashing has to be brought to an end.
Thank you. There's a gentleman just here. Yes, you, sir. There. On your left. There we are.
Thank you. George Pagoulatos from the European Reflection Group of the New Pact for Europe. As the crisis in Italy shows, the economies in the Eurozone periphery are being subjected to a new round of contagion and increasing financing costs. Having undertaken several years of very painful adjustment, they now see the financing costs rise again, which is a clear demonstration of the fragmentation, the financial fragmentation in the Eurozone. So my question to you is, given the fact that this also suggests that painful competitiveness gains achieved through internal devaluation and wage deflation are being swallowed by higher financial costs in the periphery, what can be done in order to address this financial fragmentation? and to promote a further degree of necessary risk sharing that will also build a more cohesive Eurozone.
As the European Union is not a state, and hopefully will never be a state. I would be strongly against this idea of United States of Europe because people don't want that. We have to apply rules. We have rules. They are completed, they are amended, they are applied from time to time in different terms than in previous times, which led to the result, given the flexibility dimensions we introduced in an economic reading of the Pact, that Italy was allowed to spend in 16 and 17 18 billion of euros without any sanction of the Stability Pact. This was unprecedented. Wouldn't we have done so, we would have killed the weak recovery in Italy and elsewhere. My suggestion would be for this week to be as silent, that means prudent and cautious on Italy whenever someone is asking you a question on Italy. I have full confidence in the genius of the Italian people.
Thank you. Was there a gentleman there, and then there's a gentleman over there. Oh.
Yeah, thank you. Wolfgang Weber from BASF, but asking in a private capacity. You rightly said that you are talking here to convince people. So it's obvious that we all need to reach out to the many others across the EU. And over the decades, many unions have been created, the banking union, the energy union, and so on. One of the oldest unions is the European Broadcast Union. It basically creates once in a year the European Song Contest. But what I have not seen is that it creates an open debate between people from the different countries. We discuss about the state of the EU within the Germans, in the formats Anne Will, Maybrit Illner, and I guess the other countries do that the same in their home turfs. When can the Commission, when can we all start to have these public debates not in Brussels, but in the many member states? Thank you.
I'm no longer a fan of the Eurovision Song Contest since Luxembourg wisely decided no longer to participate to this costly event. Number two, the main weakness of Europe is that amongst ourselves, 27, 28, and beyond that, members of the Council of Europe, which is an important organization, what the members of the European Union very often are dealing with benign neglect. That's the room where all Europeans are gathering. We don't know enough about each other. I have a long political life behind me. Do you really think that the French do know what exactly is happening in Germany? Do you really think that the French and the Germans know what is the situation of each another? Do you really think that those living in the north of Germany, Hamburg, know what is happening in Corsica and in the Bretagne? No. What do we know, we here, about the Finns of the north? And what do the Finns and the Swedish know about Mezzogiorno? Nothing. So, this is a major task, duty, for educational systems. We are not told at school who the others are. And this is reflected in the Eurovision. That's more about dancing than about singing. But everyone thinks that it's about singing, but it's about dancing, it's about light, it's about nothing. So we have to change this. That's why I'm giving such a tremendous amount of importance to the Erasmus Plus program. We are doubling the budgetary volume for Erasmus Plus. But you have to know that only 0.4% of young Europeans are participating in this. And it's a kind of elite-driven system. That's why we were deciding now to include the apprentices in the Erasmus Plus program. That is something we should boost. 9 million young Europeans have taken part till now in the Erasmus program. Result, 1 million of babies. That's the continental-wide libido program of the Commission, which is explained.
Can I just take a sort of survey of just how many people have got questions at the moment? Otherwise, if we take them one at a time. Okay, so if I'll ask perhaps you, sir, at the back.
Is someone in the room who knows what I have to do next?
Yes.
10 minutes. Yeah, okay.
10 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take you, sir, there, and then you, sir, if you'll ask your question. And then we'll have another couple of rounds with people over there, and you there, madam. Go on then.
Hello, Till Eichler for the Friedrich Ebert Foundation here in Brussels. Friedrich Ebert Foundation here, Till Eichler, my name. Mr. Juncker, do you consider Luxembourg to be paradise, and what do you think of tax competition within the European Union?
As you are a convinced guy, you are, of course, following, minute by minute, the debates at the European Parliament. And you will have heard, if not I was wrong because I was not loud enough, that the Commission, I have to say my Commission, for the first time in history, has developed major proposals as far as tax harmonization and tax coordination is concerned. We have introduced the automatic exchange of information. We are proposing to the Council, but the Council is not acting properly, to have a common une assiette commune, comment on dit ça, a common taxation base for enterprises. We have introduced a proposal concerning the GAFA, the internet companies, where member states are very often too reluctant. So I do really think that we have so many priorities, but taxation is one, and the social dimension is another one. That's the reason why we have developed, and the member states did agree, the pillar of social rights. That's why I was trying, against warnings from everyone, to amend the Posting Workers Directive together with Maria João, pardon. That's why we have changed the approach, which is ours as far as parental leave and parental leave is concerned, because this pillar of social rights has to be translated in concrete legislative acts. So I'm happy that you do agree.
You say.
The last one.
My name is Kamal Dalili. I'm working in the European Parliament.
Take mine.
No, it's working. Go on.
It's working?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. My question is regarding the European engagement on international issues. Like recently, the Trump administration withdrew from the treaty that was signed with Iran, nuclear treaty. And what would be the economic impact on the European Union? On the other hand, since the involvement of Iran in Syria, that which results into the migrations of hundreds of thousands of Syrian refugees who are coming to Europe, which also have a great economic impact. So how do you respond to that? Thank you.
I don't want to respond to that, but I have to respond to that. More generally, and independently from the examples you have mentioned, my feeling is increasingly that we have to change our decision-making rules when it comes to international policy. We can no longer be present on the international scenes with this unanimity rule we are applying when it comes to foreign policy-related decisions. Again and again, we are experiencing that if 1, 2, 3, or one country is blocking a decision, the European Union on the international level is voiceless. And then member states they are speaking for themselves because nobody is able, because there is no common position, to take the floor in the name of the European Union. One day a country is blocking a decision at the United Nations on the Chinese behavior in the South Asian Sea because this Chinese Republic is investing in a country in Europe. The other day we cannot decide on the human rights situation in China because China is investing in another European country. We have to decide by qualified majority, and this can be done without treaty changes, because the Lisbon Treaty is providing us with a bridge saying that the European Council can decide by unanimity on the domains where in the future the Council of Ministers can decide by qualified majority. I do think that this should be done in the field of taxation. I do think that this should be done when it comes to external affairs of the European Union. And I hope that the European Council, taken suddenly by a move of wisdom, would agree to that, but I doubt that this will happen in the very next future, because this is going to the heart of national sovereignties. Nations want to defend their interests also on the international level, but when it comes to European interests and to common positions to be adopted by Europe, I think that there we have to decide by qualified majority. So thank you, that was it.
Okay, thank you. Can I help you? Thank you very much, Mr. President, for making the effort to be here today and giving us your wisdom, wit, and breaking news as well. In a second, I'll ask the panel to come up and we'll get some more questions. And there's a cluster of people over there who had questions before. Sorry, the President has to go, but you get first dibs of questions to the panel. Okay, so can I invite you? Thank you very much. You improved it. It was very good. Okay. Okay, so we've got Yanis, no introduction needed. Karl-Heinz Lamberts, no introduction needed. Maria João Rodrigues from European Parliament, of course, very involved in all of this, and Social Democrat Group MEP, and no introduction needed really for you either, Maria. And I've lost track of who I've forgotten. Have I mentioned everybody? Gordon, I do apologize. Gordon Bajnai, former Prime Minister of Hungary. I do apologize, sir, for ignoring you for a minute there unwittingly. Okay. We are a little bit ahead of time, so we should have plenty of time for questions. And as I say, I know there were 2 or 3 of you anxious to get a question to the Commission President, and I will give you priority treatment in a minute. But I'll just join this panel here. And, I mean, there's lots one could ask about. Yanis went through it, considering the time fairly fully, and the Commission President has answered some. Let's, now the President's gone, let's get back for a moment to the thing he didn't like. Because we're in a bit of a rush. The last one, Yanis, you noticed, I didn't actually look. Not the big word question. The other one was, we're going to muddle through, was the majority opinion, I think, wasn't it? Just, we're going to muddle through. So it wasn't. So we're unstable and going to muddle through. Okay. No wonder the Commission President was not particularly impressed with the game. But sticking on that theme, the NP report, and this was before the latest turmoil, of course, in Italy, but identified a new sense of optimism about the future, despite populist tendencies. So can I ask you, by way of introduction, and you may want to say a bit more than this, but just, are you individually on the optimistic side of the scale? And if you are, which of the key challenges set out in this report would be the one which would most make you reduce your optimism? So, Maria.
Well, I do agree with the report when we speak about a window of opportunity. This is still there. Nevertheless, we are now dealing with sometimes unexpected complications. Because I agree that in the past 2 years, yes, in 2016 we were in a multi-crisis mode. Then last year we moved into a stronger sense of optimism, and all the indicators about recovery were giving support to this impression. Even, of course, the crises were still there, and we were in difficulties to build up credible solutions for migration, for Eurozone crisis, to cope with the upcoming challenges of climate, digital revolution, everything overlapping. But now, even I think that we still have a window of opportunity, a small one. We are dealing with some unexpected risks. And in fact, I'd like to single out one, which is unfolding in front of our eyes, which is the Italian situation. And basically, I think what happened in Italy is a kind of resume of the European difficulties, because we had an overlapping in Italy of the difficulties to deal with Eurozone, with high unemployment, particularly young people, but also a very sluggish investment, very sluggish investment in the future in Italy, and then combining these with the difficulty to manage refugee crisis, migration at European scale. All these has combined in a very difficult mix in some Italian regions, and now the situation we have is that Italian population is being told they have only two possible choices. Either they accept the status quo as it is, when it comes the Eurozone where it's not easy to invest in the future, where it's not easy to reduce unemployment, plus difficulty to manage migration, so accepting the status quo, or perhaps it's better for them to consider, even a disguised term, an exit of Eurozone, and who knows, European Union. Well, I think this is a very dangerous game and misleading one, because I do think there is a third choice, which should be clear. And the third choice would be Italian government able to transform what must be transformed in Italy regarding reforms, investments, organizing the refugees crisis, plus a government working with the others for larger scale European solutions. This is possible, and this is needed. And for us Europeans, we really need to have Italy with this kind of political behavior. But it's very important that this is also made clear close to the Italian population. Otherwise, we can have, let's say, because the next hours will say, this is in fact a very special day today, if there is conditions to move in this direction or not. Most of all, of course, the responsibility lies with Italians, but we are so interdependent nowadays that it became a European problem. And we, the other Europeans, we are following the events, and we have also a view about this. And so I'm telling you my view.
Very good. Exactly what we needed. Mr. Bajnai, you're a member of the NPE advisory group. Where are you on the optimism-pessimism scale right now?
Right now, I'm a bit more optimistic. And I tell you why. I think the European Union has ever made any change when there was a crisis. And the last 12 months was relatively quiet, so I was pessimistic about any change happening. Now that we have a proper crisis developing, there may be better chances that that change will come. Just continuing where Maria João finished, we often talk about the populists of the South or of the debtor countries who are saying we are losers of the European cooperation and we should get out. and they are offered currently a so-called impossible triangle of economics: no exit, no bailout, and no change in the current status quo. These are one of those should be allowed, or there should be another solution, and that's when we come to the other kind of populism. And that other kind of populism is the northern countries' populism, which has recently strengthened, for example, in Germany, but other countries, which doesn't regard all the benefits that they receive from being the Eurozone member and the European member. Germany and other countries are major beneficiaries of an artificially low euro exchange rate with their export industry. And this is artificially low because the risk of Italy, Greece, and other countries is bringing down the average exchange rate of the euro. A Deutschmark today would be much more expensive, and that would make the German export sector suffer. Germany in particular, has been free riding on the defense budget of France and the UK and even the United States for many years. So in that respect, Germany is also a big winner of Europe, as well as I think Italy has been a major winner of Europe, and even Greece for a long period of time. And what I miss today is that political voice that is speaking for Europe and is talking about the benefits and what we have to lose if this all goes down. And facing the European elections, parliamentary elections next year, these voices will be more and more missing unless we do something about it. And this report, this New Pact for Europe report, is a kind of realistic search for finding a compromise between the political reality and the technocratic necessity. People often say that technocracy is policy without politics, and populism is politics without policy. I think what we need is good quality politics that is trying to combine what needs to be done and what is acceptable and manageable with the population.
Are you optimistic?
I was optimistic all my life, and I'm so old that I don't have the intention to change. And I'm convinced that we need a Europe that works. But frankly speaking, I cannot see concretely today how it will happen. Our window of opportunity becomes smaller and smaller. We need some results. Otherwise, the European voter will bring us next year a European Parliament with a complete different composition, and then the real problems will start. We need results now because people must understand that things are changing, and we need results on some fundamental issues, especially on the issue of migration. The migration issue changed completely the European landscape in the last years in all countries. We need also results for acting capacity in the next years. The MFF is a very technical issue, and if you discuss about money, you don't have friends longer more, because everyone is thinking on his own situation, and it is clear everyone is beneficiary. But everyone must understand that he is beneficiary. So we need a solution on this issue. And we need also a fundamental paradigm change. Europe must become in the next months a reason of hope and not a reason of fear. Otherwise, we will have big problems.
And that requires a united voice, and that goes to 2 points. One that Yanis made, it's in the report, and you specified it. Your concern when you realised out in the, in the countryside or wherever you were with the report, that there was a sense that no country or no government seems to be too concerned about the problems of the other. There was we've got our own problems, was the message you seem to be getting. We can't worry too much about everybody else's. And Herman van Rompuy, who of course is here and will conclude in a while, has also warned about a lack of leadership in the EU. So if you've got this sort of fragmented approach and it's every man for himself, every government taking care of national and regional priorities that are not shared with anyone else, how do you get to Mr. Lambert's ideal world where everyone's coming together in a short time and are singing from the same hymn sheet, to take a view from the Eurovision Song Contest?
Well, let me make a step back. First of all, I hope that Gordon is right, i.e. that a situation which, if you look over the past 6 to 8 months, has not very much improved. The sentiment, which we also felt during our debates in the member states over the past 6 months, the sentiment I felt was that there was an appreciation for the need to strike a kind of a deal which we have in mind, but there was an increasing amount of people who were thinking we're not moving in that direction, that the window of opportunity is smaller than you think, that we are facing a situation where the differences between member states are increasing, which undermines what we consider to be this win-win package deal. So this is part of the analysis. On the other hand, that's why I say I hope that Gordon is right. We see that there's an increasing pressure to find that kind of a compromise. And what happened over the past days with respect to Italy, and also what is happening with respect to our relationship with the US and what has just happened today, is showing that the pressure of us coming together, finding that kind of an ambitious while at the same time realistic compromise under the current circumstances and the current window of opportunity, that the pressure to do so is increasing. However, I think that has also been the result of discussions which we had off the record with numerous people. A key lies in Paris and Berlin, and as to whether Paris and Berlin will be ready and able to formulate a joint, as I said earlier, inclusive initiative which also reflects the interest of others, which can then be a basis to progress at EU 27 level. And here, I think a key lies with the German Chancellor. You were referring to, I wrote it down, the Nordic populism. And that's true. There is this kind of line of argumentation which is not reflecting the realities. And what we've heard, and I say this as also being half German, over the past days from the German side is, should we, in a situation in which we see an escalation in a key member state like Italy, further increase the risk, share the risk among each other? I think that is the wrong appreciation of things and the wrong reaction, because it will further lead to a situation in which a worrisome situation in Italy might become even more worrisome. If the reaction of us is that we say we should not share more risks, which de facto means we should stay where we are and do not do the things which President Juncker was talking about with respect, for example, to banking union. So if that's the political logic, the reaction to what we're seeing happening in front of us, it would be exactly in the wrong direction, because it would further undermine the ability to progress, to use the window of opportunity, because it would increase the fragmentation and distrust between member states and not move us closer together. But even if there is, and I come to a conclusion, even if there is a German-French understanding, don't understand me wrongly, that cannot be a dictate. It's not about them dictating what should be done. That's why it needs to be inclusive. And there are a lot of veto players who, even if there is an agreement between Paris and Berlin, who would, veto players beyond those in the internal German debate or French debate, provided that there is a joint initiative, who will be trying to target and argue against any kind of movement at the present point in time. So I hope, again, that's where I started from, that Gordon is right, that the pressure from the crisis will move us in the right direction, not in the wrong direction, because otherwise I fear that if we don't move in the right direction, we will be sitting here in 6 months' time, in a year's time, in 2 years' time, maybe facing things which we thought we should have avoided 2 years ago.
Well, and then as Karl-Heinz was saying, you then run into the Euro elections where the lack of any progress in the interim may further exacerbate sort of who knows what kind of makeup, or political makeup of the parliament. That might have to mean a reset of everyone's calculations then again. So, and just to emphasize, I'll come to you in a minute, but just to emphasize, because you made it clear that the Franco-German sort of solid sort of agreement on what to do. Without that, you won't get anywhere. But as you've just indicated, that cannot be them prescribing, Paris and Berlin prescribing for the others, because we're back to an old wound, aren't we? If it ends up as being the two big countries just saying, well, that's the way forward, guys. You follow us. So we don't do that.
That wouldn't work.
No. Okay, Maria. You want to?
Well, I'll come back to this one, but let me start from the point we were in the previous part of the discussion. What we can see now, and again, the Italian case is the last case to prove this, is that we do need European scale solutions. To cope with migration crisis, to cope with Eurozone crisis, is no longer possible for a country alone to tackle this. This is the first evidence we can get from what is happening. Now, what is the problem? Why are not these European solutions being developed quicker? Where is the problem? The problem lies on the fact that the level of priority depends on each country. For some countries, the migration issue is a central one. For others, Eurozone is more important. Italy is an interesting case because it's a case where the two challenges are incredibly important. But this means that the only way to progress is to get, in fact, a package deal. That's why the report is good in this direction, because if we want to come up with something accepted by all, we need to have something which can be perceived as a win-win game by all in the end. So your question, who gets what in exchange of what? This is a very important question. And of course, Mr. Van Rompuy, as former president of the European Council, knows this better than anyone. And that's why the report is really useful, because the report is defining the terms of this win-win package deal, and with now a very relevant importance, because we are heading to a European Council in June, where these issues will be in the agenda of the Council. Eurozone reform, migration, together. And so we need to craft the terms of this package deal, which lead us to your point about who should lead. The problem of European leadership, because in fact we have a deficit of European leadership. Look, my opinion about this is that, of course, Franco-German couple dialogue is central, is crucial, but not enough. Not enough. I think the political game is more complex. We have the interplay between European institutions. I'm not saying this just because I'm a member of the European Parliament, because I've been around and I know how this plays, but this can play a role. And also the role of other member states to come up with a more balanced solution and in the direction of what we can call, let's say, inclusive deepening. Because we do need deepen, we do need to build up European scale solutions, but in such a way that we are not closing the doors to the others. What happened today, by coincidence, the European Commission released the proposals on how to complete the fiscal pillar of the Eurozone. And I think this is a step in the right direction, but still quite small. So now we need to build on this. In any case, it's very important that we avoid these proposals, even they are quite limited, to be killed, because the risk is there. And we need then to build on them and to give them more leverage. These are decisions for the next June European Council. And I believe, I agree with Gordon, is that all of a sudden, the Italian case, even this is disturbing and extremely worrying, can play as a wake-up call. We can no longer delay this reform. We have been preparing this reform for 7 years. in technical terms, we know quite well what should be the solutions to overcome the Eurozone crisis. And now this is really a problem of political will. And the price, if we go on delaying this reform, is to feed in these anti-European movements. The terms of the choice are so clear now.
I just wanted to continue on Maria Jo finished on this, the report of this spirit, the spirit of this report, the new Pact for Europe, very well can be applied to the current Italian crisis, because what this report says very realistically, that there has to be a pact, a package deal. No, there are no individual absolute solutions, but there have to be a compromise. And what we have learned since the crisis, that after the decades of economic policy, now political economy rules our life. And the political economy interpretation of the current situation is we need to understand what each player's political public opinion is able to accept and then make a solution based on that. That's what the report suggests. In the given situation, there are two fundamental questions to ask. Can we realistically accept that the citizens of Germany or Finland or Netherlands, or so-called the northern countries or the net contributors, that the citizens of these countries can sign another blank check without knowing what the amount is? No, you can't expect that politically, and you have to respect that. There is another equally important truth. Can you realistically expect that the citizens of Italy, like Greece, walk into a tunnel knowing that there is no exit at the other end? No, you can't. If you ask them to do that, they will rebel. So you have to find a way in a package deal which guarantees to the net contributor countries, the creditor countries, a solution where they can be sure that the check that they have to sign is limited and there are no more blank checks signed. But on the other hand, you have to give a future, a perspective to the debtor countries like Italy or Greece, Italy with 132% debt to GDP, you have to give them a light at the end of the tunnel that if they have to take some further sacrifice, they have taken some already, there will be a better end. There will be a perspective at the end of it. Without that, people will have nothing to lose, and therefore they will continue to revolt against the status quo.
Thank you. I want to see if there's any questions in the audience. Yes, lady there. Gentleman there, apologies. You've got such a fine head of white hair, I thought it was... Mind you, these days, so you don't know, do you?
Thank you very much. I agree with every word, but where does it lead? I don't know. Let's approach it from another angle. The world. My view on Europe is that we are alone in the world. We have allies, but no friends. Everybody chases his own interest. And wouldn't it be possible to put Europe in the center of this global picture, explaining that in several areas there is simply no alternative than coming together and developing common projects. In fact, Macron is the only one who has put the point on the table when he says, "Je veux une France souveraine dans une Europe souveraine," which means that if there is no sovereign Europe, there never will be a sovereign France. And this goes also for Germany. I'm afraid, ladies and gentlemen, that Germany is far weaker than we think. In certain aspects, it's number 15 on the Davos competitive rank. Yeah, has gone again 2-3 places down this year. Digitalization is bad. It is extremely risk averse, and that must be put on the table too in the discussion on what is the value of Europe in the world. And our citizens are, in my view, very sensitive to that point. Okay. What do you think of it?
No, thank you very much. I'm not sure the specific question. I mean, that's a whole conference in itself, that whole doomsday scenario kind of thing. But does anyone on the panel want to take up any of the points? Like just briefly, because I have questions. But yes, do.
Well, indeed, I agree with you. I agree with you fully, because I think in spite of these difficulties we have in internal decisions, there is a big glue for Europeans which has to do with the external challenges. Because when we think that the concern now with security, with a better relationship with the neighborhood without which we cannot manage migration, if you think about climate change, if you think about digital revolution and how to combine these with our way of life, all these can only be addressed with European scale solutions. And we need European politicians to make the case for this. And this creates a big basis for European unity. Then we can deal with some differences. But these ones, for sure, they are a strong ground for European unity. You are right. I agree.
I can agree completely with you. The very challenge for the European is the world. Of course, we are really smaller than we think. And the world continues. But our other problem is, how can we reach our citizens? I think that there are two ways to move in the discussion. It can come from the outside world. So much decisions from Trump can help us. But we need also a pressure from our citizens. And there must be decisions. And it's a wonderful report, but this report is not the short term in the next weeks. It is a very interesting roadmap for the next months and years, and I think it is a very good document. But our immediate future depends on what happens in the next weeks. Have we somewhere really non-paper? Europe is living from with non-papers. Does it exist a non-paper about what France and Germany can bring on the table? One of the very high civil servants of the European Union said some days to me, no, it is a problem is that it even doesn't exist. And so it is very important that we have a start. And then we must convince everyone, and Germans and French people must also be really on a mindset they will discuss with others and not impose something, that we need decisions. And if we can reach this goal, then we will have a crisis, another crisis. And that is it, sure. With each crisis, we have new opportunities. But I think we had actually enough crises. Now we need something else. And the situation is a decision-making system problem. Europe cannot decide because we have too much need of unanimities. But even the MFF, well, if there is someone who doesn't agree, then we are blocked. And the situation in Italy is not easy because we have a potential government with only one common point against Europe. What will be the case tomorrow in Spain? Just a question. What will happen anywhere in Europe? And we have some days before the next summit, and there something must come on the table. And frankly speaking, I cannot see it on the moment, perhaps because I have not the good glasses, but it should be important to come with a result.
Okay.
I think that Karl-Heinz is right. We don't have the luxury of a lot of time. On the other hand, and I think it was Maria who reminded us of that a lot of the ideas of what needs to be done have been on the table. I think what we're lacking is the political will and the political courage to move ahead. There's a lot of risk aversiveness, and there's a lack of political will and of political leadership. And I'm sure that Hammond will allude to that in his speech. But if we lose the time we now have at our disposal, there's never a last window of opportunity. So we're talking about the current window of opportunity. But if you look forward, 2019 will be a year in which we will have the European Parliament elections, in which we will have a new institutional configuration in this town. If you look into 2020 and 21 and you look at the electoral calendar, it will not be an electoral calendar which looks very conducive to having another window of opportunity to exploit. So if you don't use this moment in time until the end of this year, it might take a while for the next window of opportunity to come. And those who have at least enough political power to push things forward at European level, including the French president, including the German chancellor, what will be their leverage in 2020-21? We already see that the political capital of Angela Merkel is not what it had been. So I think Karl-Heinz is right. We need to use this present point in time, and if we don't, there might be repercussion. Just one remark, and I'll be quick. The global role of Europe is part of the basic narrative, and I think there's a wide agreement on that. But it's often a reality in Sunday speeches. Monday realities often look different, and we will see now in the case of Trump and the pressure that is putting on us with respect to Iran, with respect to trade, whether we will be able to stick together. That's not a given. But there's a second part of a basic narrative with respect to the future. And I think that is something which is also very vivid in President Macron, which is he calls it the illiberal threat of people who want to push our societies, our economies, in a different direction of what we had agreed to at European level. And that will show itself also next year in the European Parliament elections. And I'm not that worried so much about what the next European Parliament will look like. I'm worried about the repercussions of the European Parliament elections at national level and how member states will or will not be ready to find compromises thereafter. And I fear that if parties like the AfD or Le Pen do well in the European Parliament elections, they will even further argue we are expressing what the future of Europe should look like. And that is going to create a lot of problems for us, which even supports even further the argument of it's now where we need to come and use this window of opportunity, which doesn't mean that that will be the end of the game.
Okay, gentleman there, and then come to you. Yes.
Yeah. Congratulations, first of all, for the report, and would like to make a remark, first of all, to France and Germany. 15 years ago, on the 23rd of January, we had the 50 years of the Élysée Treaty. The newspaper Libération had on the front page something which was called France-Allemagne, one country. This would be impossible today. Why? What has completely changed is there's a lack of understanding, and every time that we say France and Germany should too, where are those convinced Europeans in both countries who push in the interest of the other? The difficulty that we have is also that, for example, an excellent initiative which we created at that time, I was working for the Franco-German Youth Office at that time, and in charge of these festivities, we created this partnership to have one high representative of every ministry from the other country in the ministry of the hosting country. What has this become? There is no suspicion, because what will he tell to Macron? Is he there on behalf of Merkel? And I think this is really a big problem that we have today. Somebody said it, we cannot build Europe without the Europeans. The deals that you propose, and I think this is something very essential, need convince people who go to convince the citizens. People will be in the street for the next European campaign. What will we say? Will we say you need to make a deal to the citizens? Certainly not. We have to say what has been done. And what do we want to do? What has been done? Pillar of social rights. What has been done? Posting of workers. Many things have been done. GDPR has been done. These are the arguments that can convince people to say we need more Europe because Europe has brought something to us. So my question is, where should we, in your understanding, set the frame besides the institutional issues and the deals that you propose in your report? Where should we focus upon really to show and to undermine the arguments of the populists? You cannot convince the potential voter of AfD or Le Pen with such a report, but you can convince what is the interest, what is the win-win for her or for him. And I think this should be much more also in the center of interest, like Karl-Heinz stated. In the end, it's not about only on governments and institutions, it's about the citizens.
Thank you, Connie. Before anyone takes up that, could I just suggest I'll pick up a couple of questions in the middle. There's a gentleman there. Two gentlemen there, yeah. And,
Peter Lennon, a very concerned European. In order to re-energize the image of Europe among Europeans, do you think that after 60 years of all male presidents of the European Commission, we need a lady as president of the European Commission? And if so, who would you suggest?
Very good. Okay. And yes. Hang on a minute, gentlemen. Well, there's only one candidate on here, but
Hi, I'm Leo Williams from the European Anti-Poverty Network. I had a couple of interlinked quick questions related to what President Juncker was saying around how the MFF was inherently political. And I guess my question is whether the panelists think that given that we still have almost 120 million European citizens living at risk of poverty, is the political choice to cut cohesion funding, which is a traditional lifeline for social funding, and to be increasing funding on defense and security, etc. Is that really the right political choice? And do panelists think that with the amount of money proposed in the MFF that we'll really be able to meaningfully deliver on the sustainable development goals and the pillar of social rights, which we would argue would really be a win-win situation for citizens as well? Thanks.
Okay, we'll leave it there for a bit. I know the gentleman there wants a question, but now, well, on this intriguing one about who are we going to have as the first female president of the Commission, Maria?
I think this is out of the agenda.
Seriously, do you think it is possible?
But I'd like to come back to the issues which were being discussed here, because I'd like to be now more concrete, perhaps controversial, but starting from citizens' concerns. And let's deal with these problems without taboos. In a particular neighborhood, when people are receiving migrants, and up to a certain level, there is certain unease. This is happening in many regions of Europe. I really believe that the way to address this is, first of all, a comprehensive European strategy to manage migration, starting with the origin countries, a good management of the European borders, and then a proper integration when they come. In particular, refugees, they must be supported and protected. But this is not your story, because we need to understand that for European citizens, if they don't have jobs for them, if they don't have better prospects to improve their lives, this can be started as a problem. And we need to deal with this. So what is the implication of this for the win-win package deal? It seems to me this is quite clear. This means that those member states asking for the others to have solidarity when managing migration, and they ask rightly so, they should put in the package deal the other part of the solution, which is stronger means to create jobs and improving living conditions. And exactly, and that's my point, which means that we need to have instruments to complement national budgets. And that's why the current discussion on the purpose of MFF, the budget for the future, and the way to reform the Eurozone should be part of the package. And now let me add the controversial point, because I'd like to be concrete and precise. If we really want to manage migration management is there to stay. It's a long-term challenge. We need to be prepared for this. The only way to deal with this is to have a strong strategy to promote growth, jobs, and better living standards. This is the other side of the solution. And this means to invest. Therefore, MFF, yes, a powerful strategy to invest in the future, making the best of low-carbon transition, making the best of digital revolution. We need to combine all these. Second, the European social pillar, this is something which should be translated in a general, sustainable leverage of living conditions. But then we can ask, but where are the means for this? Let me be precise. Where are the means? Well, and here I have two proposals, which are the controversial ones. When it comes Eurozone, my assumption is that, yes, national budgets, because they are committed with the common fiscal discipline, they need to count on a Eurozone fiscal capacity as all the other monetary zones in the world. And the only way to have proper leverage is to accept that the European Stability Mechanism, where we have an important amount of resources, will be used to leverage this fiscal capacity. And this is a step which should be taken. And then, when it comes financing European budget, well, this is not rocket science. Yes, we are dealing with more challenges, defense and migration and energy transition, and this together with cohesion, this means more resources. Where are they? They are in new sources of added value. Added value is being created in a completely different way today. If you think about digital economy, where we have a large amount of added value being created now, that's why I think this digital tax is a great proposal. And I'm fully in favor of this.
Thank you. Anyone want to say it?
I agree with your proposals, but I also know that there is no unanimity in the European Council for realize it. And so we are back to the start. But an even simple way to have improvements is a political effort in Europe to really improve the action and investment capacity of local and regional authorities. If we want to improve the situation of people on all levels, from daily life, then we must go to this regional and local level. And if Europe is able to bring a visible added value and real input to improve the situation on this level, then we can also hope that people will be more convinced that European Union is the right way on the future.
Just to reflect on actually two questions. I think in politics there are usually three topics. Sometimes this one dominates, sometimes the other one. The three topics, one is sort of economic social redistribution, as one of the questions asked. The other one is identity. The third one is kind of security. These are the main topics. And in certain periods, redistribution questions dominate. Like Bill Clinton said, it's the economy stupid. But now recently we have seen governments losing elections despite economic growth, like his wife. So it's not just the economy stupid, sometimes it's the identity stupid, or it's the security stupid. Now today, almost everybody is dissatisfied with Europe because on each of these three issues, Europe is not delivering full results. Part of the population is dissatisfied with Europe, and I'm talking about now next year's election, and believe we countries, there was a question about sovereignty, and we countries have shared some of our sovereignty at the European level, and Europe is not exercising this sovereignty on our behalf. And some people believe we haven't sacrificed enough sovereignty, Europe needs more sovereignty. So I think the problem is that on each of the three topics, we identify the questions, and they should be solved very soon to regain the legitimacy of Europe. In terms of the economic policy, Europe has created a monetary union because that was popular and easy, without the fiscal union, which was the kind of the backside of it. Now we are getting there slowly and probably slower than we should and taking huge risks. The second such suboptimal solution was we have created the Schengen Agreement, we have brought down the internal borders, but we forgot that sovereignty at the European level means we have to be able to protect and control our external borders. So it's again a half-baked, half-finished solution. And the third one is we have created the common European foreign policy and trade policy, but we haven't forgotten to add the defense and security aspect to that. So it's a toothless foreign policy. So we have to now stop these gaps, fill these gaps on all three items. And if that happens, then that's a good argument for those where I consider myself belonging to, who believe Europe has to progress further and not go back into the narrative. But next year's European elections will be fought on the ticket by those populists who will say the biggest issue is migration and anti-migration and national differences, east-west, north-south, and they will try to make sure, in many countries they exist, almost every country, that migration, anti-migration will be the big issue because it's very popular. And those who believe that Europe, like myself, that Europe is Noah's Ark in which we can survive the flood of globalization, we should step up with our position and say, actually, Europe is the solution to these problems and not part of the problem. For that, we need these urgent decisions to be able to argue for that.
Okay. Did you just have a question, sir? Yeah? Yes, do you have a microphone anywhere over here?
Thank you. My name is Milan Nidja. I was member of the European Reflection Group, and in the process of preparing the report, I moved professionally from Bratislava, Slovakia to Berlin, Germany, where I'm working now at the German Council on Foreign Relations. Let me challenge you, the whole panel, on what Yanis said in his last intervention, which is drawing a picture of Europe without a package deal as we look to the future. Let me come to the question with an observation from our discussions that we had. At one point you said, this is Europe where we are so interdependent on situations in domestic politics of many member states that this is new. Which brings me to an observation that something is happening to our societies in Europe and beyond that we haven't discussed. Our societies are more fragmented, more polarized. So political landscape is more fragmented, therefore it's more difficult to govern and to push through compromises from EU level at national level. Germany now is a status quo power. Chancellor Merkel might decide not to push through what she even can agree on or not at the EU level because it would disbalance her equilibrium in Bundestag and her own parliamentary club. So, as European politics at national level is more fragmented, as it is difficult to more govern, there are only very few structurally sort of outlying countries, like two of them come to mind, which is Macron's France and Orban's Hungary. Therefore, these leaders can play above their weight. But if you look around Europe, you see not stalemate, but difficulty. And here is my question. If you think about Europe until the end of the cycle and beyond 2019, how can a Europe of decisions not but by package deal logic but by default look like? Can you elaborate on what would European Council look like if you would have leaders that would try to reverse the logic and take decisions that would not affect them negatively? So not solidarity, not package deal with as many positives as possible to as many member states, but the opposite.
That thought, John, did you have a question at the back there?
My name is John Wiles. Next year, as has been frequently mentioned, there are European Parliament elections. In every one election, every single one since the first direct election in 1979, the turnout has got lower. And sort of general explanations for this involve, it is said, lack of understanding of the relevance of the Parliament, lack of understanding of the relevance of Europe. The one question which doesn't get debated, and it's a very difficult one to answer, but I'd particularly like to hear Zhao on this, is actually has to do with the quality of the members of the European Parliament, in the sense that there is, I mean, all the time I've been involved in Brussels since 1980 now, there has been a constant debate about how to communicate with the citizens, and a constant frustration that, if you like, it was the effectiveness or ineffectiveness of heads of government and ministers that are somehow blockages in the system. Some of them do it well because they believe in Europe. Others, increasingly, as we've seen in recent years, use Europe as an excuse for either what they don't want to do or what they say they can't do. But what is the role of the member of the European Parliament in this changing political context? The more that Europe enters into national domestic policies, as it does now, everything from migration, obviously, to fiscal policy, and indeed security and defence, the more that Europe enters into national politics, the more European parliamentarians ought to be seen to be arguing the European case through their media and through activities. I don't think that, generally speaking, that happens. I think members of the European Parliament see their role as sitting on committees in endless hours of discussion here, passing legislation, absolutely necessary. Somebody has to do it. And I would like to ask you a personal question, Maria Zhao, because it's probably, I think I know the answer, but is your name recognition in Portugal as strong as it is in Brussels?
The last...
Is your name recognition as strong in Portugal as it is in Brussels?
Okay. I can start with a very, very interesting discussion, and perhaps I will try to answer to your question and the previous question. Because you were provoking with a scenario whereby member states will be taking a very self-centered viewpoint. Well, this would be extremely risky scenario, because so far we have a mix of self-centered behavior, some status quo, which is the dominant position, I think, and some attempts to come up with European solutions. We have all these inside the European Council. This is happening right now. But if the sequence of events would drive us to a situation where all of a sudden most of the European Council members will be focused on their particular needs, this will be an extremely dangerous situation for the European Union, because this will mean a further risk for fragmentation, tensions, lack of mutual understanding, ultimately a kind of risk of nationalistic drive, again, in the process of European history. This will be extremely dangerous. Now, we can ask, which are the counter forces for this? Where are they? And then I come to your second question. Because they are, we need to recognize, in some of the members of the European Council who are calling for European scale solutions, but they are a minority. So far, the majority belongs to the status quo. This is my assessment of the situation. And that's where I believe that the European Parliament, yes, can play a role. Because let me tell you on my own experience, I'm now in fact in the European Parliament, but before that I was dealing with the other institutions. EU presidencies before the Lisbon Treaty, so European full-fledged presidencies, then European Commission, also Council of Ministers, and now I'm in the European Parliament. What is my conclusion? Is that the European Parliament can play indeed a very interesting role, not only because after the Lisbon Treaty, it got stronger co-decision competences in many areas. But because of the internal process of the European Parliament, which is quite unique, and I discovered this only one being there, is that there is a precise method to define the common interest. And we vote by simple majority. This is powerful. We don't need even a qualified majority. We vote by simple majority. Of course, to get a simple majority sometimes is not easy, because we need to build up a large coalition of more than 325 members. This is a hard work. But this is possible, and we are delivering many decisions. And more recently, we took an interesting initiative, which is to invite the members of the European Council, one by one, to come and to open dialogue with us. Yesterday, we received, for instance, the Prime Minister of Luxembourg. Before that, we received Macron. And this is indeed interesting, because this dialogue, which has a length of 3 hours, gives the opportunity for each member of the European Council to speak not as a national prime minister, but he should also be able to speak, meaning a European politician, able to speak in European terms, to assess the situation at European scale, to divide solutions at European scale. This is a capacity the member of the European Council should also be able to develop. But so far, this is too low. What I can tell you is that when it comes to the European Parliament, because we are organized not by national delegations, we are sitting by national parties, political parties, or political groups. This pushes us to think in European terms. And this is an interesting development, but I think this is crucial, because we really have a deficit of European leadership, of real European actors, people able to think European, which means, and we have referred to this, to understand the different needs, the different expectations. But this is happening right now. So that's why I also have some hope. But let's see what happens to the next European Parliament.
Okay. Yes. 2 remarks which came to my mind when I was listening to different questions, but also especially to what Milan was saying. And the first has to do with expectations and expectations management. I think when you rightly say, and that's also something which we discussed a lot in the European Reflection Group, which also finds itself in our report, that there is a high level of polarization within our societies. And I think that that's very true. And that is something which we see not only in Europe, but also beyond, which is pushing people or allowing people to push people in a certain direction. And by them, I mean those who usually are being called populists. I don't like the term that much, because it is a term which means different things to different people. But this division and the polarization within our society are pushing people in the direction of politicians who want to move our societies in a direction which is different from what I want societies to be in. Whether it's on the left or on the right, but also in the mainstream. But this is something which we can diagnose throughout Europe, and it's a phenomenon which goes very deep. And now comes the expectations part. If we raise the expectation that it will be Europe or the European Union which will be able to counter these developments which we are seeing at national level in Europe and beyond, I think we raise a level of expectation which you won't be able to fulfill. So I think we need to be very careful when we raise certain expectations, because they might very much backfire and play exactly into the hands of those who are profiting from the polarization of our societies. So if you need to fight the polarization of our societies, don't pretend that Europe is the answer to solve that polarization of our societies, because then we will fall into the expectations capability trap. And the second is a more positive note, because if you're right with your hypothesis that we might be moving towards a European Council which is moving in the opposite direction, following what you call the reverse logic, I think that fear is a real fear. And that's why I believe, and why I've not given up the hope, that we will see over the upcoming months that there will be a certain kind of momentum with respect to EMU reform, that there will be an understanding between Paris and Berlin, and that there will be a German chancellor who is aware of these fundamental dangers. Brexit, Trump have shown that things which we thought are not possible can become possible, that she will push in a direction to use some of her political capital to find a compromise. I'm not talking about a compromise which will be the ultimate qualitative leap moving with respect to economic and monetary union to fulfilling the deficits which we're having, or creating a migration policy which we will have a solidarity between member states which will have reached a level they should, because we know what political realities are. But it is important to have in mind that we move in a right direction. I think the sense of direction with respect to the future development is very important with respect to using this current so-called window of opportunity. If we don't, and if we're not creating a sense of direction which is something which can be conveyable also in the 2019 European election, and you put concrete deeds under in which directions you want to be moving, you will move exactly, you have the danger of moving exactly in the direction of having a composition of the European Union at its top level which will follow more the reverse logic, which then will create the dangers which Maria was talking about. So that's why I think that danger could still, within the remaining parts of this year, provoke a development which follows the logic of what we tried to convey within a certain margin of what one could and should expect.
Thank you, Yanis. We're going to wrap it up there now, but I just want a very, very quick question to you, Yanis. Right on the point we're here for, the report. It's not going to sink without trace. Where does it go from here? Is it in play? I tried to get Mr. Juncker to say he'd slap it on the tables of every leader. He didn't quite agree to do that. But it's somewhere in the minds of the leaders. It's certainly in Juncker's mind. It won't exactly be on the summit table in June, will it? But I'm sure you would say, I don't want to lose it. This is not going to be wasted. We've done 5 years of work on this. So how do you see it in sort of like a sentence?
I'm trying to be a realist here. I hope that we have contributed to the debate, that we're doing that also in the member states. If we can affect the thinking of those who have an ability to help steer what we call European Union, which includes President Juncker, but also others, and we will be continuing to do that. We will be in Berlin in a couple of weeks' time. We are still trying to make sure that we have off-the-record meetings with highest-level politicians in order to convey the message we're trying to convey. But let's be humble. We're trying our best to provide added value, and we'll see where we will get.
Very good, thank you for that. Can I ask you, we'll all step down now while I just introduce our final, very patient VIP guest today. For the conclusions, it's my great honour to welcome the President of the European Policy Centre and President Emeritus of the European Council, none other, of course, than Herman Van Rompuy, who's going to draw the thoughts of today together and conclude. Mr. Van Rompuy.
Mr. former Prime Minister,
members of the European Parliament, colleagues, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and dear friends. One can speak about Europe in terms of hope and in terms of fear. And the debate showed that those are key words. One can look at the difficulties or at the opportunities. I choose, answering the question posed in the debate, I choose to be on the side of hope. One can only make others hopeful on the basis of facts and of arguments. To those who fear that we are close to an Italian exit, I recall that we overcame two existential crises between 2010 and 2016. Believe me, Italy cannot, doesn't want, and will not leave the Union and the Eurozone. I also recall that Brexit was not the beginning of the end of the Union, as some feared also. I recall that France didn't fall into the hands of extremists, and I recall that populists, whether they are in opposition, in government, or almost in government, don't want to leave. So the professional pessimists are not always right. But we have to do more in order to deepen and strengthen the Union and the Eurozone. We have to prepare for the future. We have to re-energize Europe. And the new Pact for Europe is about that. And this time, and that's something new, we have to anticipate. We used to wait for a new crisis to erupt before undertaking action. We used to wait until we are the back against the wall, the abyss in front of us, and the knife under our throat. This time we have to anticipate. There are always pretexts to say no to every reform. An argument is, things are going well, why should we take risk with reforms which will be attacked by populists? We have created 9 million jobs since 2014, so what's the problem? They forget that the new financial or migration crisis is bound to happen. Global public and private debt is 12% higher in terms of world GDP than in 2009, just after Lehman Brothers fell. The migration potential of Africa will be 4 times higher than today in a few decades. So we have to prepare for the future. We have to protect the next generation. I remind the current leaders of the wise advice of a British philosopher, Jeremy Bentham, formulated 200 years ago. If the time is not ripe, we have to do everything to make it ripe. Saying no to any kind of EU reform is not an option. If we do not move forward, we recede. Qui n'avance pas, recule. What I fear most, and I join many speakers of this afternoon, what I fear most is stagnation of the European project. I don't fear the exits or less Europe. So we have to do more. We have to better protect our people against real or perceived threats. What kind of threat? High unemployment, insecure jobs, mass illegal migration, climate change, terrorism, social, commercial, and tax dumping, huge inequalities, and the threats of war on our eastern and southern borders. If we cannot protect people, they will choose protectionism. If we fail, tribalism and nationalism will be further strengthened. If we fail, large parts of our population will turn away from our open societies, our open economies, and our open democracies. It's not only the idea of the European Union that is in danger. The liberal worldview, which values democracy and freedom, is under siege.
Even though we obtained results on all those domains that citizens see as threatening, and I can mention, for instance, the number of jobs, but also I can mention results in other domains, it's not enough. And that's why openness is under pressure in parts of our union. Protection, it is a key word. It was used by President Macron. I think that Macron borrowed it from me, but I borrowed it from President Mitterrand. Une Europe qui protège. Protection and openness are key words for our political and social models. A program of re-energizing, not of reinventing Europe, but of re-energizing the Union, has to keep this ultimate objective in mind. A new balance between openness and protection. It shouldn't be a discussion on institutions, on new leading functions, or on technicalities. We have to focus on policies, on content, on results. A Europe of results. Who can be opposed to better results on prosperity, security, and fairness? How can you say no to the goal of better protecting Europeans? You can only obtain results when we involve the European level. And to those member states keen on their sovereignty, I say, don't be afraid. Never forget that the Union cannot function without the member states. To some extent, they are the Union. A new Pact for Europe is a compromise, as always in our Union. A compromise between key sensitivities such as responsibility, solidarity, and security. A compromise between risk sharing and risk reducing. And that balance is needed in every single policy area. But as always, the devil is in the detail. Once you enter the room of the European Council, you are obliged to compromise. Leadership and courage is needed to compromise. It is not a sign of weakness, but of strength. By the way, there shouldn't be a deficit of leadership. We often speak about a democratic deficit, but there shouldn't be a deficit of leadership. And I know it's more difficult now than a few years ago, due to the fragmentation of the political landscape and the volatility of political behavior. A new program for the Union of 27 has to do away with short-termism on, for instance, on prosperity. We are already changing our growth model by making it more sustainable. We transformed capitalism by integrating the social dimension. We call it the welfare state. My country, social expenditures amount to 25% of GDP. Now we have to integrate the climate dimension. And now growth has to prioritize investment, research and development, and innovation. Otherwise, secular stagnation is a real possibility. By the way, our new Horizon 2027 scientific program will amount to 100 billion, proposal of the Commission, 30% more than in the previous MFF. We have to deepen and broaden our single market. We need a digital, an energy, and a capital markets union. We will conclude new free trade agreements, as President Juncker said, in Asia and in Latin America. And on top of this, growth has to be redistributed more fairly amongst all. Fairness is back on the political agenda. In the United States, growth and full employment don't prevent a deep social malaise, as Gordon Bynai said a few minutes ago. Europe is indispensable in these four dimensions of this new growth model, although the biggest responsibility lies with the nation states. They, together with the European institutions, are serving the same cause, the well-being of the European citizens. It is as simple as that. I repeat again that we already obtained some results. And I give you just an example. We will decrease our greenhouse gas emissions with 23% by 2020, whilst the economy will be 53% bigger than in 1990. It's a major change in our so-called business model. The Eurozone and the Schengen area have never been truly finished. They were meant for normal times, not for facing the biggest financial crisis since the 30s, and not for facing the biggest inflow of people coming from outside the European Union to our countries. They were designed for normal times. Even though both have undergone considerable reform, they are still unfinished. And as far as the Eurozone is concerned, the focus should be, in my view, on the completion of the banking union, now even more so since the recent events in Italy. Other reforms are necessary, but the time is apparently not ripe for it. Speaking about security, the political agenda of citizens and leaders shifted dramatically the last years. Karl-Heinz mentioned it. Migration and identity became the defining themes in the election campaigns of almost all our member states. We have to protect our external borders, and we only can do it in cooperation with the neighborhood countries. And we have to work on a more common asylum and migration policy based on solidarity and on human decency. The recent budget proposal of the Commission foresees this time 10,000 European coast guards. We will only get the support for the inevitable legal migration, inevitable due to our demographic evolution. We will lose, so to speak, around 55 million inhabitants without migration from now on to 2080. So we will only get support for the inevitable legal migration when we are in control of illegal migration. In terms of military security, we have to make sure that the new instrument of enhanced cooperation, so-called PESCO, is a success and give the military dimension of the Union more visibility. 25 EU member states signed up for the launch of this PESCO agreement, agreeing to a list of projects that will help plug capability gaps and reduce duplication among European militaries. This was not possible a few years ago. A few words on equity after prosperity and security. Growth has to become stronger, more sustainable, and distributed more fairly. We have to hold on to our Rhineland model and avoid the huge inequalities of the Anglo-Saxon model. Great strides have been made in the fight against international and European fiscal fraud and tax evasion in the past few years, but we cannot become complacent. The European pillar of social rights should be implemented at member states and at EU level as soon as possible. The social question has returned to the political agenda, and inequalities are once again at the heart of politics, also in the fight against extremism. This Europe of the future should also preserve and strengthen the Union's foundational principles. The primacy of multilateralism. We shouldn't be the only ones in the world that still defend multilateralism. It is under pressure. The second foundational principle is guaranteeing the democratic rights and freedoms of all the citizens in all our member states. It's a major obligation for the EU institutions. And the third one, a common approach in the Union if possible, differentiation if necessary. Ladies and gentlemen, conversation is a constitutive piece of our democracies. Conversation leads to moderation. I love both words, conversation and moderation. The world needs moderation as an antidote to nationalism and harshness. Hearts are hardened. We have to put moderation into practice at every level of power and responsibility. The famous Greek historian Thucydides said 2,500 years ago, of all the manifestations of power, moderation impresses man the most. I hope that he is right. Not only do our citizens need Europe. At times like this, when the international multilateral order is under threat, the world needs a strong Europe too. At the geopolitical level, Europe has to be firm on its principles, whilst maintaining an open dialogue with all global actors and all countries. That's the way we see foreign policy. Firmness on our principles, but always ready to dialogue. Assertiveness instead of aggressiveness. I forgot completely to whom I was hinting. I hope that global economic interdependency and interconnectivity will ultimately prevail and allow peace to prosper as it did in Europe. The Union is not a superpower, but a global actor in those domains where we can speak with one voice. We did it on Ukraine, on the Iran nuclear deal, on Brexit. We were surprised by our own unity. On free and fair trade, we are demonstrating this whilst we are speaking. And we spoke with one voice in Paris at the climate conference in December 2015. The West could be stronger without Brexit and without American unilateralism. Some European nations are tempted to veto the rule of unanimity, to veto decisions and break up solidarity. But in the unstable world of today, a country can no longer go at it alone. What would Germany or France be without the European Union? And Britain is discovering this harsh reality every day. We don't have to be afraid to be a European. We have to say it loudly. We simply cannot solve the problems of our societies without this European dimension. And young people, they live in another world, a world of much more openness and opportunities. I am asking myself, who actually is delivering a rearguard action? Ladies and gentlemen, the work of the new Pact of Europe is not over. Yanis did a brilliant work. Bringing people together, bringing people from different nations together, to exchange, to talk, and to think. Our work is highly appreciated by the leaders of the EU institutions, and you listened to President Juncker, and by so many others on the terrain. Europe is conversation, and the new Pact for Europe is part of that conversation. Dear friends, we cannot change the past. We only can change the future. People moved by hope are future-oriented. We have to overcome fear, leave it behind. We have to turn our fear into hope. We have to become our own beacons of hope. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. A very rousing and fitting end to the proceedings today. And thank you for your kind remarks about the need for more moderation. That warms the cockles of my heart. Thank you very much indeed, everybody. The final thing to say is that there is a cocktail just outside the door. I think this direction, just across the hall here. For those of you who wish to stay, thank you very much to the panelists and to everyone. And this will be remembered partly for the day of breaking news. The statement that Mr. Juncker made in this room about Mr. Trump, about the trade situation, is now on the wire and everything. And it's, it'll be a day to remember for that reason, apart from the NPE report. Very good. Thank you. Good night.